Bronwyn Lund here from Bornholm Tours. I'm going to take you on a tour of Bornholm's railways today. The railways closed down in 1968, but in my hometown here of Nexø, we actually have a very nice museum with some lovely preserved carriages. So I really hope you enjoy the tour. So we're here inside the museum to start with, and then the plan is actually to walk along and walk along where the railway track was to where it actually has been turned into a cycle path. And I have actually done a couple of films with the cycle path included and mentioned that it was the railway line. The other thing I'd like to do is actually dedicate this film to one of the viewers of the channel called Kat. And we're actually going to walk past Kat's dad's house on the tour. And he actually left Nexø and emigrated to the US in 1905. So Kat, I really hope you enjoy this tour. This is dedicated to you. So we're just walking around to the museum at the moment, and what I want to do is actually go into these beautifully preserved wagons where you can see the goods and different things that were transported by the wagons. Now, this wagon was obviously a goods wagon. And some of the most common things that were transported on the railways was milk and eggs and medications from the pharmacy, and also farming produce, because as we all know and we've seen on the other films, Nexø and Wagon, the main town on the island, are actually harbour towns. So a lot of things were exported out from the town. The railway on Bornholm was actually built and started in 1900. And before this time, there had actually been about 25 years of discussion about whether there should actually be a railway or not. And so finally it was decided to build the railway, and the railway opened in 1900. And it was one line, and it went from Wagon across the island to Nexø, and it passed through Belka as well, so it came up the coast. This is the post wagon, and this was actually where all the mail was sorted for the island. So there wasn't actually a mail room on the island. The mail would come straight off the ship from Copenhagen, and it would come straight into this office where all the mail was sorted and then delivered along the railway line. Got a couple of workers' cars and bicycles. These were used to maintain the railway. And this wagon that we're going to go into now was the passenger wagon. And it's quite interesting because they didn't want to actually have first, second and third class on Bornholm. They just wanted to have one wagon that was equal for everybody, which is very Scandinavian and very Danish. But there was a bit of an argument backwards and forwards about this. And so there was actually a first class and a second class created. And what you can see is that here in this part of the wagon, the seats are a little bit further apart, and so are the windows. And then as we walk further down the carriage, the seats are closer together, and there's less distance between the windows. just have some more photographs of the railway as we go down the side of the passenger carriage. This is the station master's office as it would have been set up in Wagon. And out the back here we just have a few rooms and extra photographs set up in what would have been the waiting room. In this room I just wanted to point out the beautiful Bornholm clock that we have here, and I actually want to do a film based specifically on Bornholm clocks, which were an export in fact of the island. We have this wonderful furnace here. And I don't know if you noticed, but there was actually a lovely little furnace in the post wagon that kept the postmaster warm on cold winter days. And we're actually going to go out into a very cold winter day today. It's only 2 degrees outside. So this was another set up as another passenger cabin with a lovely picture of Oosterlaars Church in the background there. What's behind there? Oh, just the little kitchen. So if we just stand before the map of Bornholm here, just make sure I don't fall off the step, I can point out the railway which actually went from Wagon, which is this over this side of the island, and it went sort of up and then it split and went all the way across the island and around sort of Ulkerkebu, and that was basically because of some of the local terrain wasn't good for building the railway on, and then it went down and all the way across to Belka and then up to Nexø along the coast, and it's this section of the railway that has been converted into a bicycle path. So that was the first railway, and that opened up in 1900. Then the second railway to be built went all the way up to Ellinge, which is up in the very north of the island, and that was very much a tourist railway, and that opened up in 1913. And then the last railway to open up went through the middle of the island, and it actually followed the same track to Ulkerkebu, and then it split and went up through Elmingen, which is the beautiful forest that I've made quite a few films on, and then all the way up to Guljem. And that was the third line that opened up in 1916. And then the railway ran until 1968, and then it was finally closed down. So that just gives you an inkling of the history of the railway here on the island. And now we're going to go out, and actually maybe we could have a look in here. This is another example of a passenger carriage. So now we're going to go out and we're going to walk along where the railway would have been. Now, as well as the passenger railway and the goods railway, there was a harbour line as well. And the harbour line which was the industrial railway, actually started around here and ran all the way down the harbour. So here we are, we're standing on the harbour of Nexø at the moment. I'm just going to walk behind the buildings that are here on the harbour and continue down along this street, because this street was the railway. And the railway line, the public railway line, was built as close to the harbour as possible so that the shipping company, which was called East Bornholm Shipping Company, could actually use the railway to get their goods over to the other side of the island, around the island. Hey? We're coming into the harbour proper now, and the building directly in front of us, harbour building number 8, was the weighing station for the harbour, and it's been converted into a cafe now. It makes delicious food, and you can actually still see the weighing machine inside the building. And over on the right is a beautiful example of a merchant's house. And that is where goods would have been stored before they were either shipped out to the world or transported around the island. Now we're coming into the harbour. The hay on our right hand side is a maze for children to play in. And instead of following along the harbour as I've done in some of my other films, we're going to actually go up into the town a bit, because I want to show you where the main entrance to the train station was. So this was where the railway came to in Nexø. the railway ended about here, and it was, or began, depending on whether you're making a journey from Nexø to Wagon or the other way round. And it was right here that the railway station was built. And it was sadly torn down in 1973, about 6 years after the railway closed down. And the harbour has actually been built out, so it's not as much on the harbour as it was back then. But these two trees here actually mark the spot of the main entrance of the train station. So the train station was right along this part of the street, and the train line was behind where the road now is. And in front of us is a shopping centre. It's a furniture store that's been built obviously since 1973. So now we are following the road, and this road was the original railway track. And over here on the right hand side is the house that Kat's father lived in before he emigrated to the US. You can see the church steeple behind. And the whole street corner was destroyed during the bombing during the Second World War. And at the time that Kat's father lived in the house, there wasn't actually a garden, but this corner was built, was rebuilt after the area was bombed. The house managed to survive the bombing, and the church as well, thank goodness. But they did actually rebuild the street, so it looks slightly different today compared to when Kat's father lived in the house. And the family would have had a view of the harbour before this building was built, and the trains would have gone past on their way up to Nexø station, past the house. I'm just going to go out to the street and continue to walk along where the railway would have run down to the start of the bicycle track, and then we can actually see all the way down along the bicycle track the railway heading on its way down to Belka, which is the beachside resort south of the town here. It's our closest sandy beach. And I've actually done a film of Belka, so have a look out for that one. So we'll just cross over here, and on the other side of these bushes is actually a wall, and the harbour has been built out quite a bit, as I said before, but along here there's actually a wall, and it was built quite high to protect the train from the waves, because when there's a strong onshore wind, the waves can get pretty strong, and there was occasions when the waves were so big that even though there was a wall here to protect the train from the waves, there would still be a spray coming onto the train if the weather was, if it was a strong onshore wind. If you have watched the Nexø town films that I have made, you may recognise the street which is over to our right. I have done a film which incorporated that street and gone inside a typical home on the island, a small cottage that was built in the 1850s. It's always interesting to see how they've shaped up over the years. So we're coming close to the edge of town now, and the bicycle track remains There goes one of our buses. That's the way we get around the island on public transport today. They have taken over from the trains. It's not quite the same, I don't think, catching a bus as it is catching a train, but still very grateful for the service of the buses on the island. Certainly use them. The really nice thing about the buses on the island is that you can take your bicycle on the bus. So even if the bus doesn't sort of stop near where you want to go, you can actually take your bike on the bus and get a bit closer to whatever your destination is. When I did the autumn films of Eckodale in Elmingen, I actually caught the bus and then rode my bicycle up to the forest, because the bus doesn't quite go all the way into the forest. So here we are. This is the part of the railway track that has been converted into an excellent bicycle path. We're just going to go up to the bridge and end the tour there. But this little bridge here has replaced what was a railway bridge, but it wasn't really a bridge, it was just two railway tracks that ran over the stream. And I've actually filmed this area. There's a small harbour and a bird sanctuary up ahead of us. So that was a tour of the history of the railways on Bornholm. I hope you enjoyed the tour. If you did, please comment, like, share, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, subscribe. It goes a long way to helping the success of the channel. This is Bronwyn Lund from BronHolm Tours, signing off. Bye for now.